This is TTT Live. I'm DK Rostar. Government is now hosting a post-cabinet press briefing to update on matters of national importance. We are bringing you live coverage on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and on Facebook at TTT Live Online. We now take you to Minister de Nobrega at the Diplomatic Center in St. Anne's. And just before we do that, we are reminding you, we're asking you to follow the 3 W's as always. And we are also looking to see what are some of the things that will be discussed in this post-cabinet media briefing, and reminding you that we are bringing that coverage to you live on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, and on Facebook at TTT Live Online. Time now for that presser.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you for the reporters who have joined us here, and welcome to the viewing and listening public. I'm joined today by my ministerial colleague, Minister Stuart Young, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, and Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Coming out of today's cabinet deliberations, Mr. Young has come to join us today just to bring some clarity to a few issues in the energy sector. So let me hand over to him. Minister Young.
Thank you very much, Minister de Nobrega. Good afternoon, members of the media, to my cabinet colleague, and to all those who are viewing and listening to this week's post-cabinet press conference. I was mandated by the cabinet to come here this afternoon to address an issue because we thought it so important that should be attracting our national attention at this time. One of the most important companies for Trinidad and Tobago, certainly in the energy sector, is the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited. And unfortunately, we had a historical matter take place with the NGC recently, where unfortunately NGC posted some losses that we are quite disappointed in. Recently, in the Senate, the opposition raised a matter on the motion of the adjournment, asking the government to explain why it is that NGC, for the first time, recorded a loss of $2.1 billion for this financial year ended the 31st of December 2020. Unfortunately, on these motions, the minister responding really only has 10 minutes to get the story and the facts across. That was done, but there were certain things not captured in that short period of time. But more disappointingly, but not surprisingly, we then had a former Minister of Energy come out today and try to, as is usual on the opposition UNC side, try to cloud the whole issue and to throw all sorts of misinformation into the mix. So the cabinet has asked me to come here today and to set out, not for the first time, a number of important historical milestones that have taken place in our energy sector, in particular with the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, who we will defend to the hilt as to what it is that they're facing. They're operating in a global environment. First of all, let me start off by saying, now through you, that the NGC Group did record a $2.1 billion loss for the financial year ended December 31st, 2020, which represented a $2.6 billion change from the restated profit of $500 million for the previous year. The performance for 2020 was adversely impacted by exceptional charges of $4.2 billion. So break that down into language that we can understand as lay people. Basically, the accounting standards in the preparation of financial statements required NGC to take certain hits on their balance sheet. And the largest hit is a particular contract that the NGC was forced to enter into by the previous administration. And that ended up in an onerous contract to NGC, and they had to write off $2.1 billion in the last financial year. What the accounting standards now require is if you've entered into a loss-making contract, you have to book those losses up front. If you know you're not going to be able to get out of a loss-making contract, take it on as a liability now and write it off of your books. This particular contract has ended up in NGC having to provide a provision of $4.5 billion. All right, so what you have is the NGC was put into a contractual arrangement that is going to cost them over the life of the contract this $4.5 billion, and the accounting standards dictated that NGC write off $2.1 billion this year. They also then did a reassessment of their infrastructure, had to take an impairment there of $1.6 billion. That is normal. And then this year alone, they had to book claims against them in the sum of $500 million from an accounting point of view. These were the main items. And I just want to explain to the population how we ended up in this position, because no amount of dancing, no amount of attempts at misinformation, no amount of attempts to extricate themselves will allow those who held office in 2010 to 2015 from taking the responsibility. This is how it works. They entered the country into a contract, finalized it in 2015, that was completely detrimental to NGC and the country. It is the only contract that administration between 2010 and 2015 entered into. That's a record. No amount of dancing will ever change that fact. And now, to just remind you all, it was in December, actually the 2nd of December 2016, that I was authorized by the cabinet to make a particular statement in the parliament. And I went back and found that statement. This is the first time that we reported to the national community what had happened with respect to this contract and some of the difficulties that we found when we came into government. So I'd just like to remind you all of something that was stated, and it's on the Hansard on the 2nd of December 2016. And that was the government's statement on the government's renegotiation of the Mitsubishi Massey Natural Gas to Petrochemicals Complex project, the CGCL project, Caribbean Gas Chemicals Limited. During the period of 2010 to 2015, June 2010 to September 2015, the true position with respect to the availability and supply of natural gas to the hydrocarbon downstream industry in Trinidad and Tobago was not provided. That is a fact. During that time, there were serious gas curtailment issues. That is also a fact. So what you're seeing today in a lame attempt to try and defend what happened during that tenure and to obfuscate the facts is completely untrue. Upon entering office in September 2015, the government was immediately faced with the following. One, dealing with billions, not hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in claims from downstreamers who claimed they were not getting their full daily contractual gas supplies from NGC as a result of the ongoing curtailment situation. So when we're told, and I saw it referred to, that listen, the gas production under me was at a higher level than it was, but you are already suffering gas curtailments. And rather than do something during that period to arrest the decline in gas production, nothing was done. And then it just continued sliding downwards. This government since 2015 has been working hard, as I'll come to in a short while, to get gas exploration and production back up. So the first thing is we were dealing with billions of dollars in claims from downstreamers for gas curtailment. Two, expired contracts between NGC and downstreamers, leaving a situation whereby disputes arose due to no long-term contracts being in place to govern the volumes. So again, you hear them screaming about point leases, point leases, point leases. This started in that period. They were not renegotiating gas contracts through NGC for the plants at point leases. We had to face that when we came in. There was a failure to commence negotiations and discussions with respect to a number of both upstream and downstream contracts. So again, NGC would not have gas to supply if they don't have the upstream contracts supplying them gas that they can then sell to what we call the downstreamers. There was no plan to deal with the alleviation of gas curtailment situation that existed. This is where it gets very disturbing. It was on the 14th of September 2015, a mere 5 days after the government was installed, that we were approached by a shareholder in this project for the provision of an opinion by the Attorney General with respect to the legal documentation for this project. When files at the Ministry of the Attorney General were perused, they reflected that pressure was being placed on the public servants at both the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs and the Ministry of the Attorney General on, and these are the important dates, Friday the 4th of September 2015. That is the Friday before a general election, you have reflected in the government's files at both Energy and the AG's office that pressure was being put on the public servants to hustle this contract through. Also, on Monday, the 7th of September 2015, pressure was being put on the public servants at the Attorney General's office for the Attorney General to be able to sign off on the final opinion that would have cast this in terms where we would not have been able to do anything. So those are the important dates. Let the former ministers, Attorney General, and I'll come soon to the Minister of Finance, deny, because the documentation is there. I actually have the files from the Attorney General's office and the Ministry of Energy. But for other reasons, I wouldn't release those files because there's a lot of confidential information in there. But on Friday, the 4th of September, and Monday, the 7th of September, which was the actual general election day, you had the public servants in the Attorney General's office being put under substantial pressure for them to agree that the Attorney General should execute an opinion for this project, the CGCL project. The public servants at the Ministry of the Attorney General resisted this pressure, and the opinion of the Attorney General was not signed. God smiled on us. God smiled on Trinidad and Tobago. The former Prime Minister turned the sod for this project on the 1st of September 2015. Work out the timing. So Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa turned the sod on the 1st of September. Public servants being put under pressure on Friday the 4th of September and Monday the 7th of September to sign off on this deal and cast it in stone. However, we discovered that there were a lot of causes for concern that potentially exposed Trinidad and Tobago to billions of dollars worth of claims coming out of this single contract that they were putting pressure for persons to sign on. An inspection of the files at the Attorney General's office revealed that the legal officers in the Solicitor General's office did not agree to the Attorney General issuing the requested opinion. The legal officers objected in red ink, literally put their objections in red ink in the public service. That is the highest level of objection that is possible to what had been agreed to previous to September 7, 2015. The legal officer wrote, and I quote, "I am of the view that no legal opinion should be given as per my comments," unquote. And they went on to provide the reasons why. These warnings were coupled with written warnings issued to the former Minister of Finance and the former Minister of Energy that the agreements that they were proposing to be entered into exposed NGC to claims, damages, and losses. So to read that same former Minister of Energy saying he really didn't know all of the details, etc., and I have the letter here that was written to him and the Minister of Finance, I want the population to understand how far-reaching persons would go to try and mislead us with respect to the malfeasance, the negligence, and the destruction and dissemination of the energy sector in that period of 2010 to 2015. When we looked at these agreements, we realized that the country, not only NGC, but the country, Trinidad and Tobago, was disadvantaged by one, something called the Debt Tail Buy-Down Agreement that was agreed to. The Debt Tail Buy-Down Agreement, which was the first type of agreement of this nature that had ever been entered into by Trinidad and Tobago. What it meant is that it bound NGC to guarantee the payment of the loan. So in other words, what they negotiated under the former minister was to put NGC in a position as a 20% shareholder, but NGC would carry the whole debt. So from day one for this project, over $900 million US, NGC as a 20% shareholder would have to carry the whole debt. If the project failed on day one, NGC would have to pay to the government of Japan through their banks the full cost of the project. And worse than that, the terms that the former Minister of Energy and the former Attorney General on the Monday, the 7th of September, were trying to force on the people of Trinidad and Tobago showed that if NGC paid the full debt on the first day, they would not even get the plant. So we would not even get the ownership of the plant, but we have to cover the whole debt. Two, a policy that had been decided by the Cabinet in December 2013, which the public was never informed of. This policy exposed NGC to billions of dollars in claims for damages, and the policy was the Greenfield Gas Priority Policy. It dictated that where there is a shortage of gas supply, downstream supply contracts entered into after the 1st of January 2014 would receive priority gas over gas supply contracts entered into prior to January 1st, 2014. Again, this was pointed out to both the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Larry Hawaii, as well as the former Minister of Energy, Kevin Ramnarine, that this gas assurance policy could potentially place NGC in breach of existing gas sales contracts. The warning was ignored, and the former government proceeded with the policy which exposed NGC to billions of dollars in claims, especially in the climate of the gas curtailment that was then taking place. So again, in the dark of night, this former minister went to cabinet, changed the whole gas allocation policy for Trinidad and Tobago. We, the population, had no clue about it. We were shocked as a new government coming in September 2015 to finally discover this had been done. What this means is that every plant in Point Lisas that already had gas supply contracts for NGC, if there was a shortage of gas, tough luck for them. They would have to suck salt and they move to the back of the line, and this new plant would take gas in priority to them. So immediately you could understand how that exposes NGC to billions of dollars. Billions of dollars is a billion-dollar industry in claims. So these people who have a gas supply contract, for years, I'm supposed to get 100 million scuffs of gas today. There's a gas shortage in Trinidad and Tobago. They tell them, well, you have to take 50 million scuffs of gas and give in all to the new plant. Immediately, NGC is exposed for that. And that is what they were pressuring public servants on the Friday before an election and the Monday of a general election to sign off on. Upon discovering these matters, the Standing Committee of Energy appointed a team to renegotiate the terms of the agreements with Massey, Mitsubishi, and the government of Japan through its bank, the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, JBIC. Having regard to the current gas curtailment climate, Trinidad and Tobago would have been exposed to billions of dollars in claims against NGC, and there was also the potential to collapse our whole gas industry. The cabinet appointed, via the Standing Committee of Energy, myself, as Minister in the Office of the Attorney General, as well as Messieurs Jerry Brooks and Professor Andrew Jupiter, to go off along with a team of technocrats and work out how we were going to extricate NGC and the people of Trinidad and Tobago from the only contract that was negotiated in that 2010 to 2015 period. And this is just two of the detrimental effects of it. If the debt tail buy-down scenario occurred, as I explained to you all, NGC would potentially be exposed to pay billions of dollars. The plant ended up costing well over 800 to 900 million US dollars on behalf of CGCL without any security or benefit to NGC. After many months of negotiation with Massey, Mitsubishi, and JBIC, the government of Japan Bank, which included a turnaround trip to Japan in April 2016. In April 2016, the same cabinet-appointed team of Brooks, Jupiter, and myself, appointed by the cabinet, went to Japan on the 24th of April and returned to Trinidad and Tobago on the 26th of April. That was the level of commitment of this government. So it wouldn't be like trips of the past where people go and they enjoy themselves. No. It was literally jump on a plane, arrive in Japan, negotiate with the government of Japan, and return immediately the following day. So from the 24th to the 26th of April, this team went and renegotiated with JBIC and the government of Japan and Mitsubishi. And this then allowed the government in August 2016 to execute amended agreements which have protected NGC, by extension the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We also rescinded that greenfield gas priority policy and renegotiated the effects of this removal with Massey, Mitsubishi, and Japan of the debt tail buy-down. That was renegotiated. We dealt with the greenfield gas policy and protected via a number of other mechanisms. Understand, we came in when we faced already executed documents. One of the most difficult things we had, and thankfully it was because of the level of good faith that the government of Japan had with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, that team managed to negotiate, along with cabinet backing, the extrication from the debt tail and also the Greenfield policy. The documents were already signed. All that was needed is the Attorney General signing a standard opinion that would have consummated everything, and it would have been too late. The gas sales contract and the volume of gas and the cost of gas had already been negotiated under the former minister. There is nothing that we could have done at that stage to extricate us from that. So to come today and to try and remove themselves from the responsibility of the disaster, the decimation, as I call it, of the energy industry through this single contract is completely misleading and an attempt to moonwalk into the shadows and disappear that we cannot allow. So that is what had happened under the government with respect to that. I have here in my hands a letter dated the 24th of February 2015. Remember, I'm telling you all about what was going on the Friday in September before an election, Friday the 4th, and the day of the elections on Monday the 7th of September 2015. I have here a letter dated 24th of February 2015 by the National Gas Company, signed by the then president of the National Gas Company, Mr. Indar Maraj, as president, addressed to Senator the Honorable Larry Hawaii, Minister of Finance and the Economy, copied, the first person copied too, Senator the Honorable Kevin Ramnarine, Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs. This 5-page letter sent by NGC in February 2014, before the documentation was executed, set out very clearly all of the red flags, why they should not have pursued what they pursued, that has led to this booking of the first part of a loss by NGC, as I told you all a short while ago, of $2.1 billion in the last financial year. And that is why I say, without any hesitation or without being any fear of contradiction, that they were fully responsible for this. We did the best we could to save Trinidad and Tobago, negotiated some other onerous terms that saved us billions of dollars in claims, but couldn't fully rescue us from this. And this is why NGC suffered the loss. And let them come and deny otherwise with facts. So on the 24th of February 2015, Larry Hawaii and Kevin Ramnarine were written to. On December, I'll just touch on a few important issues. They say it was on the 4th of December 2014 that Cabinet approved the draft project agreement in respect of this project. So in December 2014, Cabinet approved it, the 4th of December. NGC was only told by letter on the 29th of January the following year. What's the reason for that delay? And they then said, you all are telling us on the 29th of January that NGC has to take a 20% shareholding in this project, the CGCL project. The letter goes on to then set out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 main red flag items, red alert items, why this is not a good idea. The first thing was the gas assurance risk. They say that GORT has agreed to implement this greenfield priority of gas supply, as stated in the gas supply assurances. Listen to what they say. Under this mechanism, projects approved after 2014, which is when you introduce this gas field priority projects, would be the first in line to receive gas after the power plants and light industrial users. Existing fully amortized brownfield plants, which is the whole of Point Lisas, would receive gas after the greenfield priority projects. The methanol to DME project has been classified as a greenfield project. It was the only one. An external legal opinion which was sought with respect to this matter revealed, and they put it in bold, this is the first warning to Kevin Ramnarine and Larry Hawaii. NGC could potentially be in breach of all existing gas sales contracts. They put that in bold. NGC could potentially be in breach of all existing gas sale contracts if it implements this priority contemplated by the Greenfield Priority of Gas Supply policy. This is due to the fact that there are currently no provisions in the gas supply contracts to deal with this. They then go on to say, NGC is also being asked to execute a debt tail buy-down agreement under which NGC will become liable to pay an amount equal to the debt tail buy-down amount. This amount is effectively the amount due by CGCL under its debt financing and can range from US $70.5 million in year 9 to US $625 million in year 1, based on our current understanding of the reserves requirement. And they put this in bold as well. NGC is likely to be liable from the start of operations unless adequate reserves are proved up. They say future gas projects, renewal of gas contracts for current customers, LNG and domestic, would necessarily be restricted, possibly terminated. Again, in bold, they went on to say, NGC will therefore be guaranteeing the financial obligations in respect of this project. Further gas supply assurances will also provide that the project is not obligated to reimburse NGC. In layman's terms, you all can understand what that is meaning. That the former cabinet was basically saying, NGC, you cover the whole cost, you take the whole risk. All of the security for this is yours, but you're not getting anything in return for it. If it doesn't work, tough. People of Trinidad and Tobago pay for the whole thing. That is what the cabinet mandated. That team to go and renegotiate with the government of Japan and Mitsubishi, which we successfully did to extricate us from that, and we cancelled the greenfield. But what I'm pointing out to you all on the 24th of February, way before the execution of this agreement, they were being warned. The Minister of Finance, Larry Hawaii, and the Minister of Energy, who now wants to run off and not take any responsibility, were warned by NGC of the detriments of this agreement. They also went on to say that this makes no sense because NGC would effectively lose all rights as a shareholder where the lenders enforce against the shares secured, in bold. Under another red flag, they say NGC provides construction guarantee and liability for any cost increase. They then also talk, and this is what has come to pass today, on page 3 of this document, under the 4th red flag. They warn the then government, the same minister, former minister who's running from it now. They say that this project would negatively affect NGC's cash in hand and by extension NGC's budget. They then went on to talk about the methanol price volatility risk. They went on to talk about the other risks of the project and the political risks. So they go on to say that where this could have detrimental effects on NGC. That's on a letter. That doesn't include all of the ink, the red ink that I told you all about, that can be found on the files at the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of the Attorney General. That doesn't extricate them from the pressure they were putting on public servants on a Friday before a general election that was held on the Monday, and the continued pressure on the Monday. So to come now and try to say, don't blame the UNC. It's not a matter of blaming the UNC. It is stating the God-given facts that cannot change. You can't rewrite history. What they did there has led directly to the unfortunate loss that NGC has had to book. Add to that the $500 million in claims that NGC also had to book this year, all flowing out of this one negotiation that they did. They like to talk about what they did to the energy industry. In 2010 to 2015, they decimated the energy industry of Trinidad and Tobago. The one deal that they negotiated, the one deal that the former Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, went to turn the sod for on the 1st of September with a general election on the 7th, has cost the taxpayers of this country billions of dollars. And if this government didn't renegotiate the way we did, it would have been even more billions of dollars. So don't come now, and I saw that the Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre put out a rambling statement as well, attacking me personally. I have no problem. Anybody could attack me. But attack me with the facts. Show where what I have said is wrong. Because what I have said is irrefutable. The NGC loss and the continued losses are as a result of that tenure. What we've been doing since then is trying to turn that around. So don't come and say, well, you went off to negotiate. You, the government, negotiated. Young, you went and negotiated. And it's your fault. We did the best that we could with already executed contracts. Because you have to understand, to keep Trinidad and Tobago as a tier 1 investment grade country, you have to respect sanctity of contracts. What that means is once you've signed on the dotted line, the ink is dry, you abide by the terms and conditions. However, we have managed on a number of occasions through proper engagement with whoever's across the table, be it the BP, the Shell, the government of Japan, the EOG, and others in the downstream industry, to renegotiate terms to more favorable terms for Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The next thing is, and I made this statement in Parliament, the only other negotiation under UNC government, which was under Finbar Ganga, as far back as that, was when they renegotiated for a plant that was supposed to be built in Labrie. So they negotiated terms for a plant to be built in Labrie. Of course, you give it more favorable terms because you want it out of Point Lisas and built in Labrie. What then happened after they negotiated those terms is the plant was built in Point Lisas. They never renegotiated the terms to a Point Lisas plant now. This has led to what they did here with CGCL, the loss of, unfortunately, arbitrations by NGC because it set a precedent, and that led to hundreds of millions of dollars in claims. This plant that was supposed to be built in Labrie, that the UNC government then gave them terms for Labrie but allowed them to be built in Point Lisas, is the second contract that is an anchor around the ankle of the NGC and dragging. The two contracts that are doing that are these two contracts. Again, that is irrefutable. Those are the facts. That is why I said what I said. That is why the government's position is, but we're not crying about spilt milk. We've got on with it. As I said here, we came in September 2015. By April 2016, a cabinet-appointed team did a turnaround trip to Japan to negotiate with the government of Japan and extricate us from unfavorable terms. And that was a 3-day trip from the 24th of April to the 26th of April, all the way on the other side of the world. They also like to raise and continue to raise the gas contracts that weren't negotiated in Houston in 2017, but came out of the Prime Minister's discussions with BP and EOG and also in 2017 in Houston. I repeat, because again, it is a fact, the Prime Minister himself did not negotiate anything. I was with him on the trip. What he did is facilitate discussions. They had hit a brick wall, NGC and these companies. They couldn't move. The Prime Minister went, met with the heads of these two companies, and we managed to unstick it and get NGC. I was on the phone with NGC in the next room, and they were the ones who were negotiating the terms, and that is what was eventually agreed. Unfortunately, that is what happened in 2017 and allowed upstream gas supply contracts to NGC to continue doing its business. So to come and say in 2019, that is what has led to the losses. Yes, the price of gas increased, but that is the cyclical nature of gas. I quoted in the Senate a few days ago how up and down commodity prices go. And it's worthwhile maybe just pointing it out now. Okay, the latest prices I've just got at 12.30 today. Let's start with oil. Oil at WTI prices are now $72.60, up from this morning. Brent, $73.86, up. Natural gas. Henry Hub is at $3.70 for the MMBTU. At the start of this year, earlier, it was hovering around $2. That shows you all how the price of gas goes up and down. JKM is $14.25, NBP $11.33. Ammonia and methanol have risen in price. Ammonia has been roughly between $500 and $600 per metric ton for the past few months, and that is why we're not hearing the cries from Point Lisas, because they're getting a good international price for the ammonia. And the same thing with methanol. Today is at $372. It's when these global prices go down. That is what we're dealing with in the energy industry. And when we talk about commodity pricing, when those go down, what happened after the initial price agreements in 2017 and prices were going down, we managed to renegotiate with the same EOG, BP and Shell better terms of gas. NGC did that along with the assistance of the government. So again, that is another red herring. I've pointed out to you all the cyclical nature of these commodities and how it affects. As I come off of NGC, I just want to end on this note, because I'm not seeing it reported. We heard about the loss from last year. I've now explained to the country why NGC has faced this unfortunate historical, unprecedented loss for last year, but I've stated are irrefutable facts. What we've missed is the chairman's report for NGC for the 3 months ended the 31st of March 2021. That's this year, the first 3 months of this year. The NGC group recorded an unaudited after-tax profit of $191 million for first quarter 2021 as compared to $31 million for the same quarter last year. We have been working assiduously in the energy industry. You have the full commitment of the government. You have the full commitment of myself as the Minister of Energy to make sure that we stay competitive globally in the energy industry. That's how I want to end the NGC story. No amount of screaming, shouting is going to change that. That this year, in the first 3 months, NGC have recorded an after-tax profit of $191 million for the first quarter as opposed to 31 last year. So don't let them try to fool the population and mislead the population that it is a disaster. The next thing that the Cabinet has asked me to touch on today, and again it would have fallen under the Ministry of Energy, is Lake Asphalt. Lake Asphalt, unfortunately, has been facing some difficult times financially as a result of COVID and other things. But to listen to what we have to from those on the other side, I want to explain to the country, just using this one company, Lake Asphalt, the types of deals that were negotiated by the UNC government and how it continues. Because they like to say, don't blame the UNC, you in power for 6 months. Unfortunately, the decisions that they took during that period continue to affect negatively Trinidad and Tobago and us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Lake Asphalt, I'm going to give you all 3 live examples right now. Today, as the Minister of Energy, I had to go to Cabinet and plead with the Cabinet to allow the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, along with the Ministry of Finance, to provide Lake Asphalt with $3 million US. That is a significant sum of money. And do you know what this $3 million US was all to be provided, all about, and why it had to be provided? Let me tell you why. On their way out of office in 2014, the UNC saddled Lake Asphalt with a contract with a company called Fastech. And they executed this agreement on the 18th of June 2014 and made Lake Asphalt contractually obligated to take 12 orders of 50,000 units of fiberboard, making 200,000 units per year over a 3-year period. They basically entered into an exorbitant contract for the supply of fiberboard to export product from Lake Asphalt. Looking at Lake Asphalt historically, there is no way they could have utilized all of that board. So as usual, it's an inflated contract. We came in, Lake Asphalt resisted this contract because it made no commercial sense. Fastech sued Lake Asphalt. They succeeded at first instance and got a judgment, and the judge ordered that they pay $3 million US. We have instructed Lake Asphalt to appeal this decision. It has been appealed and to seek a stay of execution. But in the meantime, the taxpayers have to step in again as a result of a UNC contract, UNC procurement style, overinflated, and saddle the taxpayers with a $3 million US claim. That's the first one, just with Lake Asphalt alone. The second one is when we came in, again as an administration, we found that sometime in late February 2015, Lake Asphalt issued a request for proposals for a design build of a new administrative complex in Labrie, and that they selected a certain contractor for this complex in Labrie. They then awarded a contract for the sum of $101 million, almost $102 million, in April 2015. Listen to this date. On the 25th of August 2015, Lake Asphalt was then instructed to issue a letter of acceptance, accepting the project costs to this contractor, and made an immediate payment of $18 million. You hear that date? 25th of August 2015. Remind yourself of the type of activity that was taking place in that August 2015. Remind yourself of EMBD and the claims that are before the courts, and the former Minister of Housing, who's a defendant in claims before the courts for all that was going on in this period of August 2015, less than a month before a general election. hundreds of millions of dollars being borrowed and just given out in contracts with sums of money being paid out front. We came in, we faced that, we stared it down, fought it, managed to renegotiate through the lawyers and extricated ourselves at some level of loss to the people of Trinidad and Tobago because of those contractual arrangements. I'm told that there is a third one to do with Lake Asphalt. I haven't been provided with all of the details of it. Again, another contract entered into in that period of time that has significant liability for Lake Asphalt. Those three contracts alone have sunk the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, coming out from as innocuous a company as Lake Asphalt of Trinidad and Tobago in that period by this former administration and the former Minister of Energy who likes to sell himself as an energy expert. So the Cabinet asked me to come here today and to make these points and to make them as clearly as possible for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand. These are the difficulties we continue to face, and it's not a blame game for us, it's not a shifting of responsibility because we're dealing with it frontally, but for the population to understand the difficulties that are faced and why there's a headline, Young blames UNC for NGC's $2.1 billion in loss, that historical loss, and where the responsibility for that lies, and at the feet of those people who were written to on the 24th of February 2015, the Minister of Finance, Senator Larry Hawaii, and this gentleman, Kevin Ramnarayan, the then Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs. These are the facts. They're irrefutable. The documents support it. We will continue to work with NGC and everyone in the oil and gas sector to try and ensure that Trinidad and Tobago remains a competitive sector in the global environment. I'd like to thank you all for your attention and take any questions that you may have.
Okay, so let's go straight to questions. Newsday.
Chancellor, Newsday, Minister, what, if any, action at all can be taken against the former ministers for entering us into this contract?
That is a good question. It is not something that has been explored because there is a body of law that makes it maybe a little difficult in these types of situations. If in fact it was just a bad deal entered into, what is the amount of fiduciary duty that you have? I think the population took the right decisions in September 2015 and August of last year. But it is not something we're not into. I'm not running down goose. I want to fix the sector along with the rest of the government. And that's the direction. I just took serious umbrage. We took umbrage as a cabinet to having set out the facts as to why NGC suffered a loss and to face persons like the Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre, Mr. David Lee, and this former minister coming out and still trying to mislead the population and shirk their responsibility.
Now, you said you went to Japan to renegotiate better terms. What were some of those better terms?
Well, to explain that, I obviously didn't articulate it clearly enough. The main terms that we were able to renegotiate and get us out of was this greenfield gas policy. So we were no longer saddled as a country with the obligation to allocate whatever gas there was to this plant and then the rest of Point Lisas. The government of Japan agreed with us. They understood the position and allowed us to back out of that. And the same debt tail agreement that I referred to, which would have meant that we were responsible as the citizens through NGC for the plant from day one. If everything was lost, we had to pay all of the money and get nothing for it. Those were the two main areas of renegotiation. And don't underestimate the value of reversing that decision on the gas allocation, because it immediately opened up NGC to billions of other dollars of claims because of the curtailments of gas, meaning the gas shortages that it was facing at the time and continued to face.
On the issue of the renegotiation, you mentioned that there needed to be some maintenance of the sanctity of contract. But was there an expectation that something like this would prop up in the renegotiation stages? And also, the change in accounting standards, right? How then was that being treated before the change in the accounting?
Okay, let me start with the renegotiation. It was a very difficult renegotiation because the first pushback was sanctity of contract. The first pushback was, but these are already executed contracts. All we're waiting for is a formal opinion from the Attorney General on the financing documents. We managed to use that to leverage it, and it really was leveraging the good faith that was built up in these negotiations, and they stared us in the eye and they knew that this government of Trinidad and Tobago, post-September 2015, was doing the best it could and had found itself in difficult circumstances. So kudos and thanks to the government of Japan and the Mitsubishi Group for allowing us to find the wiggle room to renegotiate out of those two very onerous terms. They could have taken us, as came up in discussions, to the international courts of arbitration and gone down that route into litigation. And as a lawyer, they probably would have succeeded because of the sanctity of contract.
Before the change in the accounting.
Sorry, yes, I am not an accountant, and what I have found is the international accounting bodies change their accounting standards very frequently, too frequently as far as I'm concerned. And this one is that if you've entered into a deal or you know you're not going to recover money or it's a bad deal that's going to cost you, book the loss now. And I think what that is to do is to protect people, so when you're looking at the accounts, you have an accurate reflection. Otherwise, you may be thinking it's profitable, and then the house of cards comes falling down, that stack of cards comes falling down. I believe that's the policy behind it. It would have been known, because by the laws of impairment, etc., they would have known that at the time, but this is just how it has come up now, because the contract, you all know that it started up within the last few months. This plant has finally started up, so that's where the losses start.
One final thing on that point. A lot was said about the former ministers, but in the response, one of the things I think Minister Ramnarine said was that there are people at the NGC who advise ministers because there's a lack of interference generally. And those same people are still advising now. So, so the culpability there, does it lie with those people who are advising?
So, thank you very much for that question, Kamal. You see this letter? This letter dated February 24th, 2015. I wish I could give you all this, but I can't, because it contains, I can't give it to you because, of course, it contains all sorts of terms and you wouldn't want competitors to get hold of it in a commercial environment. This disproves what he said. So to say, look, this is done by the technocrats, we had nothing to do with it, etc. This is the technocrats sending the biggest red flag and warning they could. They put things in bold. They pointed out very simply here to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Energy and others. These are the difficulties we see with this. So to, as usual, throw people under the bus, it simply doesn't work like that. You can't extricate yourself. I also took the time to read out. It was on the 4th of December 2015, the Cabinet approved the draft project agreement and only told NGC on the 29th of January. Read into that, where this thing was being driven by. When they were turning the sword on the 1st of September 2015, I'm sure the technocrats weren't around. When the technocrats were being pressured on Friday, the 4th of September 2015, and Monday, the 7th of September 2015, by these same ministers and the then Attorney General, they couldn't blame them then, could they? Thank you.
Terry Brown, Campbell, TTT News. Has government conducted any forensic auditing into any of these contracts, including the ones with Fastech and the other companies?
I don't think, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, the Fastech contract is something I only became aware of within the last few weeks as the Minister of Energy, because of this decision that was handed down, and that Lake Asphalt needed this government backing now for the $3 million US. And I don't think any forensic look into that has taken place.
Mr. Given what you said about the past contracts that you mentioned, what due diligence would have occurred for any contracts that NGC would have entered into during the period from the moment the administration in office now took office?
Due diligence into what? Past contracts or the current contracts, etc.?
Past and present, in terms of how have you been looking at the issue? You talked about the issues of the past contracts, but in terms of what would have happened after the partnership?
Well, understand that NGC is a commercial animal. It's what we call in law a sophisticated entity that negotiates its own contracts. What you've had is a closer relationship between NGC and the government through the line minister in writing what is going on. Writing both as in righting from wrong what is going on, and then also looking at what is being written in the energy sector now. So from a due diligence point of view, certainly my interaction with NGC, we always have independent advisors. So as you know, there are a number of negotiations taking place right now, being driven out of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. And you have the full team of technocrats at the Ministry of Energy, from the permanent secretaries, the two of them there, come down to the various advisors, etc., and the young people who are doing a tremendous job at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. But we have also insisted on the use of independent persons, because we don't pretend to know it all in a global environment. So we've had White & Case as the international law firm advising and being part of these types of negotiations and discussions. We've had Porton and Partners and Gas Strategies as two independent experts in this whole area, also providing oversight and assistance with how we conduct business.
Just wondering, Minister, how much of a challenge what you have outlined would this pose to NGC in terms of the transitioning into the more green economy aspect of energy?
I've actually started getting excited about the whole decarbonization and green and cleaner energy. I am very happy to report that NGC is at the forefront of this. In fact, they've been asking to meet with me for the last couple of weeks to present the results of the research they've done in that area, something we're very aware of at the Ministry of Energy and driving in our conversations with the upstreamers, the downstreamers. How do you make your plants greener and cleaner going forward? How do we decarbonize? In fact, some of that conversation came up today during the course of the cabinet meeting, and you all will be seeing certain things start to take place in that area. We've there's a letter of award for 2 solar parks, one in Trin City, one in the Point Lisas area, that will feed in 112.2 megawatts into our grid from solar energy. That frees up gas for further sales, and all these are types of things taking place. I am not concerned that we're being left behind in that whole green, clean energy conversation at all. In fact, in the past month, I've participated in a number of conferences, both locally and internationally, where those are the conversations, and I'm proud to report that we remain at the forefront of these conversations. There's a whole move towards hydrogen as well. I'll be going to Cabinet in the next couple of weeks with the hydrogen policy and how we can be at the forefront globally in the development of that hydrogen sector, if I could call it that.
Just a quick follow-up, Minister. As you spoke about solar, there's still the outstanding issue of domestic use of solar panels and so on.
I heard about that. Yes, I heard about that I did a radio interview this morning, and that was raised with me. I will be raising it with the Minister of Public Utilities to find out where is the bottleneck. What is it that we need to do? Is it legislative? Is it administrative? To sort of open up to the domestic market, that we can use the solar panels easily in our homes, for example, to your water heaters and this type of thing, and get that permission. I only heard about that this morning, that there is some bottlenecking and some level of difficulty for citizens to be able to access it. So I am going to have that conversation with the Minister of Public Utilities.
Jensen.
Minister, speaking of opening up, is there any consideration to allow private entities, because we're talking about allowing for fuel prices to be set by various gas stations, for private entities to import gas for themselves?
We've spent some significant time over the last week discussing in Parliament and out of Parliament this whole fuel liberalisation. The answer is no. At this time, we're going to stick with PARIA being the importer of fuels into Trinidad and Tobago. I can assure the population that PARIA is getting very good pricing on the international markets for the fuel that they're importing. For example, one of the questions that was asked of me, I think in the last 24 hours, is does PARIA purchase directly from a refinery or from traders, and why? The answer is PARIA purchases from traders. One, because refineries weren't prepared to offer them as a new startup company credit, but that has worked out to our benefit, because when you go to traders, you get better prices than if you're locked in, because a trader may have cargo that someone else was taking, they get stuck with the cargo and they want to sell it at a discount, etc. And those are the types of arrangements PARIA has been able to enter into and bring better, cheaper fuel prices for us here in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a long answer to tell you no, at this stage we're going to stick with Paria being the sole importer of fuel.
And you say at this stage, any
I can't predict the future, gents. I don't know what will happen. I mean, one of the areas I'm looking at the Ministry of Energy Industries, but looking at personally that I want to take to the ministry and then to the cabinet is the future of electric cars. So in the past few weeks, I've been looking at that and doing my own personal research. How does a car charging port work at your home, at your office? And the price has come down tremendously to what we were told as a cabinet a year, 2 years ago. I mean, you can literally plug these things into your household dryer socket and charge your car. And so the technology is speeding up. What that then means for gas combustion engines, I can't predict that. I don't know what is going to happen in the market. At this stage, we're clear our policy is Paria will continue to be the sole importer, and we will do the best we can to let the benefits of the low or high prices meet us at the pump.
If you would allow just to touch on the NGC issue, when the PNM came into government, they said that NGC was cash-strapped. They said that the former government would have spent a lot of, if not
$16 million out of their cash reserves.
So the question is now, how would NGC be able to finance this 2.5 billion?
Well, it's not a financing. Understand what it is. It goes to their books. So what they had to do is write off. They had to book a loss of these billions that resulted in, even though they had a profit before, they had to deal with the claims and deal with the asset infrastructure revaluing and to deal with that particular contract. They would have been in a profit, but what they had to do is take a loss.
Come on.
Just to go back to the issue you mentioned earlier about the gas supply contracts, so separate issue away from NGC in a sense. We know that some plants at Point Elisa's had to close or shut down some of their operations, Proman and so on. And one of the sticking points was potentially too high a price. Where are we on those?
I appreciate that question and why I'm smiling. The last year has been a difficult year in this cycle. All right, so at the start of COVID, when COVID hit the global economy in last year, March into April, you actually had huge economies shutting down their production. And when they do that, it affects the prices of ammonia and methanol. The way these gas contracts are set up is you get a gas supply, you have to pay for it. Persons didn't want to sell products at those low prices, so they didn't want to produce products at those low prices. The same thing earlier this year, when you were seeing certain plants taking strategic commercial decisions to pull back from production, to shut down and say, look, we're doing turnarounds, we're doing maintenance. It really does have, it is because of the direct effect of the price of their product that they're paying. That's why I pointed out the price of ammonia and methanol now. And notice you're not hearing any noise from down in Point Elisa's. The truth is because they're making serious money, because the global prices of these products are high. NGC managed, to their credit, to negotiate and settle a number of gas sales contracts, Trinjan and some others, including out of the Proman group. And there's just a few to be done. But what is going on there is right now the prices are high. So when prices are high, you never hear complaints, people making money. It's when the prices go low. And then they say, well, they look around, how do I cut my costs? They always want to come and ask us, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, to bear the brunt. That's not going to happen under this government.
Allowed to switch. Any more questions on
I do have a follow-up on the issue of gas supply. Apart from the issue of the price of products, but in terms of security of gas supply, especially at Point Elisa's and also for the LNG plants, what is the state of play now?
We are in some very intricate negotiations right now with gas supply. For example, we are currently in the midst of trying to finalize the Manatee contract with Shell. Once that is done, and I'm mandating that we complete that during the month of July, it means that there is a good gas supply for the future of Trinidad and Tobago going forward. We continue to be in discussions with the other gas producers to try and get their projects sanctioned so they can go ahead with future gas production. So that is something we're working on hard. With respect to Atlantic, we continue to be in discussions about the future of Atlantic. The truth is Trinidad and Tobago is a mature province, as I was explaining this morning on the radio program. What that means is, understand, we've been in this game for over 100 years. When you pull up the oil from the ground, there's no oil coming to replace that oil. it is a finite resource. So we've been utilizing our resources for over 100 years and the gas industry for decades. And then it's finite, so it goes, but we still have sufficient reserves to carry us forward in the next few decades. Our job as a government is to preserve the best and negotiate the best terms for Trinidad and Tobago in a very difficult global environment. We're hearing the major players, the BPs and the Shells, talk about the coming out of the oil industry and this type of thing, moving to renewables. So we will continue to do what we have to keep us competitive. But there's some good times ahead, and I hope we'll be able to make some significant announcements soon.
Is Trinidad and Tobago getting best in terms of the share, in terms of these agreements with the BPs and Shells and so on?
You recall the energy spotlight in 2018, if I remember correctly, and that's when we went to the country under the guidance of the Prime Minister, and we said, look, this is what's going on. We think there's been leakage, and we began renegotiating with some of the major players in Trinidad and Tobago. We've gotten some great returns. What I just read out to you all there, JKM and NBP as 2 and Henry Hub as a basket of 3 gas prices. Why that's significant and why I asked to be informed of the pricing schedule 3 times a day is because we were able to use these in negotiations, whereas before it used to be based on just, for example, Lake Charles or Henry Hub, one thing. And when you spread your risk like that, when it's high like this, Trinidad gets more money. But it is a cyclical nature. You're going to be making money today, and then tomorrow the world could collapse, as you all remember last year, where WTI was less than $1, which means, in theory, people were paying you, look, I don't want the oil anymore, come and take it, I'll pay you to take it away, as opposed to I'll sell it. That's the reality of our global commodity market. So we're doing the best we can, that I'm sure of.
The resignation of the WASA CEO, did that come up in Cabinet?
No, it did not come up in Cabinet. I saw the Minister put out a release on that, and I'm sure the Minister of Public Utilities will deal with that in the full of time.
Yeah.
I want...
Yeah. The explosion.
Ladies.
Thank you. The explosion with Nikon. Is there the investigation into that? We've heard nothing.
There are 2 investigations, as you know, taking place with respect to this unfortunate explosion in Nikwan. That, well, possibly 3. From the government's perspective, you have 2, one out of the Ministry of Energy Industries, and one out of OSH, who's our safety expert as the state, and they continue to do their work. There were some preliminary reports, etc. But right now, I believe Nikwan is working hard. They're not going to be allowed to restart until they get the green light from those 2 state entities. And as the Minister of Energy, I am not certain where it has reached now, but I know they cannot restart until we give the green light, and we won't give that unless we're satisfied it's going to be a safe operation.
Possibly 3 investigation. Was it 3?
Well, the third would be, I assume they are doing their own investigation. I mean, if I were them, I'd want to investigate, find out what caused it, identify the problem, what are the solutions to that, and then start to put that in place to get the green light to go forward. No.
I wanted to switch away from energy for a little bit to talk about something that was raised, I believe, in January of this year when the issue of tax exemptions on vehicles came up. At that time, there was a proposal by the Prime Minister to put a cap, because at the time, the optics did not look good. And therefore, we are in July. Is there any update on that?
I see that this conversation has reared its head with me at the forefront of it. No, the answer is proposals were made. They continue to be before a cabinet subcommittee. And, you know, I just like to say is a little unfortunate. And the person who moved the motion, if I may call it that, the member of parliament for Urupuch, Rudal Munilal, I found it so ironic and so hypocritical of him. And I mean, he was calling my name, so I am allowed to respond. The identical vehicle is what he drives. He is driving the identical vehicle. And I asked the question, I said, but how come, where does he get the money to afford these things? Because as far as I know, I don't know what work he does, what he does professionally since he left office as a minister in 2015. We are very conscious of the conversation. It rears its head every so often, and this is something that we are aware of, but we're not detained by.
The cabinet subcommittee deliberations, what takes 6 months to address on a matter like this?
Well, it comes down to a number of things. I mean, it is how do you look at it? Is this really something that is a priority item right now? What is it? What are the effects of this and this type of thing? I mean, there are a number of things that we look at. The truth is that it is not currently at the forefront.
And just one other thing on this. I mean, it's a book and it's available for all politicians or all members of parliament, from my understanding. But from an optic standpoint, considering you know, the pandemic that we are in, there are people who are suffering. Is now the right time to avail ourselves of that benefit?
Well, I mean, and that's a good question. I mean, you're asking it of me, and I am one of the persons who availed myself of it. I can tell you that I did not utilize it prior to this. I mean, had something on order last year, well before the elections in, I think, March of last year, and that's when the pandemic raised its head, and I felt at that time and took a personal decision. Now is not the time. Cancel the order and just backed off until this year, and when things were looking up and everything was sprightly and we were all moving along and in a direction, and then took a decision. So I stand by that. I want to just put on record, it's not only politicians who are entitled to this. Politicians pay tax. We are not tax exempt. Public officers across the board, when you look at certain levels and other, they also have certain vehicle exemptions. Judges, tax-free, and exemptions on their vehicles and this type of thing. It's very easy to always focus on the politician and say, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. But I know for a fact I work 24/7. I mean, there's never a point in time when someone can reach out to me and not get me and not dealing with, to the best of my ability, service the country. That's what it is for me personally. And I really don't think we could be faulted for that. And sometimes, depending on the context that you put on things, you could spin it a certain way. And I certainly didn't mean to offend anybody, and I make no apologies for it. I'm very conscious of what is going on out there, and I will continue to do my best to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. All right?
I normally call you Prime Minister. Minister, you're moving away from all of that. There's a restaurant that rebranded itself, and it's calling itself a marketplace now, and it has opened up on the avenue. What, if any, thoughts do you have?
I think, okay, I was just reminded by one of my colleagues that is all traveling officers. I think I just made that point when I was responding to Kamal. I am not 100% certain of what you're referring to. I spotted something as I was waiting for you all to come into the room. All I could ask people to do is just respect the law, all right? A spade is a spade, a duck is a duck, a rabbit is a rabbit. If you're a rabbit and you feel by putting a duck feather on your back, you become a duck, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So respect the law. If you know your restaurant and you've been selling food as a restaurant for all the time, and in particular a takeout restaurant, don't just go and put some, I don't know, I couldn't spot what it is, and call yourself a market. All right? It just doesn't work like that. That's form over substance. And you will get yourself in trouble with the law. These regulations are made for public health safety. I keep repeating, it's not, the government doesn't want to stop people from doing things. They're doing this because we get advice from the public health experts who have given us good advice for the past year plus, and looking at the science and doing our own reading, etc. So it is not that the government is trying to keep anywhere closed for any reason other than the safety of the public. So if you are a restaurant that sells food on the avenue or anywhere else, don't just put some bread and call yourself a bakery. The police will have a good case against you. You're breaking the law, and what you're really doing is you're spoiling it in a Peter pay for Paul, because when you go down that road now, what is going to happen to all the people who are abiding by the law, waiting for things to reopen?
Drew,
all right?
We'll close with you.
Because one imagines if they do a sort of a restructuring of their business, they would have to meet certain criteria or get approvals, or...
Jules, that is smart manism.
It's not about, as I just said, and I'm trying to articulate, it's not about these people. You're not restructuring your business. We understand the difficulties. Believe you me, I understand that you interact with people. We know that persons who work in these restaurants are hurting. We know that persons, you have your rent to pay, you're suffering as a tenant and these types of things. We want to get things restarted, but it has to be done in a safe environment. When you take those types of decisions and you break the ranks and you go take in outside there, you're not doing the right thing. You're hurting other people. Don't go and break the law and spoil it for everybody. I think we should end on that note.
Yeah.
But I just want the population to understand that we are very aware of the difficulties and we're trying to get us back there and that sort of thing. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will address us on that on Saturday. Okay?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Thank you to the viewing and listening public. We reach home safe.